Hi guys, this is part 2 of the video of the story of Hiro Onoda. The part 1 is already on the channel, so you should watch it. It is an incredible story, and we'll just continue right now. Here he was talking about when he was in the jungle about 15 years, and he is saying that he received a picture because Japanese had been sending him pictures that the war was over, that Japan had changed, and he's wondering how could even dream that Japan cities had been leveled, the Japanese ships had nearly all been sunk, or that an exhausted and depleted Japan had indeed surrendered, because Japan was not supposed to surrender. As to the details of the defeat, such as the invasion of Manchukuo by the Soviet Union or the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the newspapers of 1959 gave not an inkling. 1959 was when he was about 15 years in the jungles of Lubang. Yeah. So there were like multiple instances where information is sent to him from the Japanese, and they were trying to ask him to surrender. They were trying to ask him to get out of the jungle because the war was not existent anymore. But he stayed in the jungle because he believed that war was still on. If the search parties that came to Lubang left us reduced size editions of the newspapers between 1944 and 1959, both Kozuka and I would probably have recognized that the war was over and that we were wasting our lives. But I'd been taught that the war might last 100 years. That's what he was taught, that the war might last 100 years. And I'd received special orders directly from the Lieutenant General, who had assured me that eventually the Japanese army would come after me, no matter how long it might take. So he largely spent his time in the jungle because his senior had taught him that the war might last 100 years and they will come for him. He was there waiting for his seniors. I was not able to take the 1959 Japanese newspapers as face value. I was sure from the beginning that they were part of an American deception, which to him everything was a part of an American deception, and I was more than ready to reject anything that did not fit in with my preconceptions. I constructed an imaginary word that would fit in with the oath I had taken 15 years earlier. During the following 15 years, that imaginary word was unshaken, either by the death of Kozuka or the arrival of numerous search parties from Japan, because search parties were sent over and over by Japan to find him and Kozuka in the jungle and get him back to Japan, right? Give me a second. Let me just turn off the internet right now so that we have no disruptions while recording the video. Right, so we're good now. So not until I returned to Japan and looked out the window of my hotel at the streets of Tokyo did I understand that my word was no more than a figment of my imagination. A word of 30 years. So the jungle life. This is an important chapter because by 15 or 16 years in the jungle, he had been accustomed to the life in the jungle. He had realized that he was going to spend his time in the jungle because to his mind the war was on and it could last 100 years, and he could not leave unless his lieutenant general, who was his senior, would come to fetch him back. Right. So the jungle life. So how did he live in the jungle? How did he? What clothes did he wear? What did he eat exactly, and how did he survive in the jungle? So let's look at that. As it was, our clothes were always rotting. During the rainy season on Lubang, it would often pour for several days in a row. Our uniforms, which we wore all the time, gave way faster to rotting than they did to wear and tear. So they had uniforms that were rotting because they did not have close to 30 years, obviously, right? So they had to wash them. The trousers would rot first in the knees and seat and then at the bottoms and in the crotch, until in the last stages nothing was left but the back of the legs. The jackets starred at the elbows and then in the back. The front part usually held together better than the rest. So they needed needles and they had to keep stitching their clothes again and again over because they wanted to wear them. Since the islanders were aiding the enemy task forces that came to look for us, we considered them enemies too. So they considered the islanders of Lubang enemies as well. The islanders also prized this and kept it in a cabin they guarded fairly closely. Occasionally we would scare them away with gunfire and make off with some of the goods, which included canteens, tents, shoes, blankets, and the like. So they actually stole a lot of stuff from the islanders, which is an important point because to the islanders in Lubang, they were not good people because they actually looted them, they picked up their stuff, and he actually killed a lot of people while he was at Lubang and he was pardoned later because in his mind he had been at war, and in war everything is supposed to be fair. In the book, he's given some pictures of the shoes that he wore, his dress. Around 1965, synthetic fabrics appeared in Lubang, and we gratefully accepted a number of. When he says accepted, he actually stole a number of articles of clothing made from them. Our principal staple food. So this is what he ate. Our principal staple food was bananas. We cut off only the stem. The staple was bananas. He actually lived on bananas for 30 years. Our principal staple food was bananas. We cut off only the stem, sliced the bananas, skin and all, into rings about a quarter of inch thick, and then washed them thoroughly in water. That way, the green bananas lost most of their bitterness. Then we boiled them with dried meat in coconut milk. This resulted like overcooked sweet potatoes. It was not good, but we ate this most of the time. So the food was not good because it was like they somehow prepared a dish of green bananas and cooked them with meat, which is beef, and ate them at overcooked sweet potatoes. This is what he ate for and he survived for those 30 years. He did not just survive for those 30 years. An important point to mention here that after he actually left the jungle in 1974, he lived for 40 more years. That means all through those 30 years that he lived in the jungle, and he survived on bananas and beef, it kept him healthy. It didn't destroy his health. He was so fine that he lived for 40 more years after he actually escaped the jungle. Ever so, 3 cows a year were enough to provide meat for one man. 3 cows a year were enough to provide meat for one man. Although the water buffaloes were large and furnish a good deal of meat, it did not taste very good. Horse meat, although he also ate horse meat. Horse meat, although tender, strong odor, and does not taste as good as beef. This is information we can't get from any other book in the world because nobody's really eating horse meat and comparing between buffalo meat and horse meat and cow meat. Because he had to live in the jungle, he knows the difference between all sorts of meat because he killed all sorts of animals just to barely survive. We always boil the water after. So this is how they drank water, because since they were drinking water right from the lakes or ponds in the jungle, he boiled them. So we always boil the water. We always boil the water before drinking it, even if it looked perfectly alright. Even if the water looked perfectly alright, it looked clean, he boiled it. Having no doctor, no medicine, we were very careful to keep an eye on the condition of our health. The reason they boiled the water, the streams on the island were nearly all so clear that we could see the bottom. The only trouble is that the cows and the horses that had been turned out to graze would drink water upstream and then relieve themselves in the water. So that's the reason they actually boiled the water. Having no toilet paper, we had to use palm leaves and tails to actually wipe off their ass. There were no tissue papers in the jungle. There are no tissue papers in the jungle, by the way. So they had to use palm leaves to wipe their ass. Wow, that's jungle life. Fortunately, there was no malaria in Lubang. During my 30 years there, this is an important point again, there was no malaria in Lubang. During my 30 years there, 30 years, I was sick in bed with a fever only twice. During my 30 years there, I was sick in bed with fever only twice. He was sick, and it's not in bed actually, it's just randomly he said it here, because there was no bed in Lubang. During my 30 years there, I was sick in bed with fever only twice. He was sick only twice in 30 years with fever. Twice. And over here in cities, we're sick every now and then. For 30 years, this man fell sick with fever only twice. Working with bolo knives, Kozuka and I could build the hut. So this is how they built the hut. They actually, because they needed some place to hide their heads from insects, from the sky. Working with bolo knives, Kozuka and I could build the hut in 7 or 8 hours. So they learned how to build a hut for themselves. So this is how actually he describes the jungle life. It doesn't sound very pleasant. It's extremely difficult. It sounds incredible that he survived 30 years. Our rifles were always within easy reach. We took off our shoes, but during the whole 30 years, I never once took off my trousers at night. During the whole 30 years, I never took off my trousers at night. Wow. It's an incredible story. I can't even believe this happened. I just can't believe. He also makes a point about sleeping here. The reason we slept on sloping ground was simply that this way, if we were suddenly awakened, we could see what was around without raising up. Actually, during my entire 30 years on Lubang, I never once slept soundly through the night. He says, during my entire 30 years on Lubang, I never slept soundly through. When we slept on the ground outdoors, I shifted my body too often to keep my limbs from getting numb. He didn't sleep properly for 30 years. During my entire 30 years on Lubang, I never once slept soundly through the night. He drank water which they had to boil all the time because cows and horses were relieving themselves in the water. They survived largely on bananas and cow meat, which is beef. Wow, we were particularly careful with the last haircut of the year because it was a psychological boost to open the year, and they gave themselves each other haircut. We also celebrated our birthdays. I remember 1 or 2 birthdays I commemorated by giving myself a newly made cap. Every morning I brushed my teeth with fiber from the palm trees. They didn't have toothbrush in the jungle, obviously. When I washed my face, I usually massaged the skin with scalp. When I wiped off my body, I often washed my underwear and jacket at the same time. Since we had no soap, this amounted to rinsing the cloth in plain water. But sometimes I removed the grime from the neck and the back of my jacket with the lye from the ashes. I put the ashes in a pot and poured water of them. This is how they washed the clothes. So there were insects in the jungle. The ants cause us bodily harm. There are at least 5 varieties that have stingers like those of bees. These attack the softer parts of the body. Speaking of stings, there are also a lot of bees on the island. Great swarms of them fly around the bushy area near the foot of mountains like huge sheets, like centipedes. Under fallen leaves, there are apt to be scorpions. When we slept outdoors, we were always cleared off a place about 30 yards square. And even though I woke up in the morning several times to find a scorpion hiding under the rock I'd used for my pillow. Other unattractive residents of the jungle included snakes, as big around as a man's thigh. Wow. Sounds incredible. So that's the end of this chapter. But it reduced the supply problem. So he's talking about beef. Our standard of living tended to rise in proportion to that of the islanders. Shimada's death deprived us of a faithful friend and a valuable worker, but it was reduced the supply problem to some extent. If only because the meat from one cow could feed 2 longer than if it were 3. Life in the jungle was never easy, but so far as food, clothing, and utensils are concerned, it was far easier in the later years than the first 5 or 10. The Devils in the Mountains, which is the 18 years the Kozaka and I spent together, I was mostly engaged in guerrilla tactics. In 1965, they acquired a transistor radio, again from the islanders. The radio was a Toshiba 18 transistor set, seemed to be a very good one. As in the case of newspapers we'd received, we did not believe anything we heard as on the radio. So they did not believe anything from the newspaper like they did not believe anything from the radio. He had some fights with Kozuka off and on, but mostly they were friends. The islanders called us the mountain bandits because they actually stole from them. They robbed them. The kings of the mountains, the mountain devils. No doubt they had good reasons to hate us. On the last day of 1971, we did our washing in the middle reaches of the Agyavan River where the water was clear and rapid. As it turned out, this was the last New Year's Eve with Kozuka because Kozuka was shot. I asked Kozuka to lend me his jacket which was dry. He quickly consented. When I put on the jacket, it warmed me to the bottom of my heart. The New Year's Eve and the one which arrived on Lubang in 1944 were the most memorable during those 30 years. So after Kozuka was also killed by the Philippine army or the police, he was alone. He was now left alone. He says, I shall never forget October 1972. That was the day in 1972 Kozuka was shot down. But that is the day Kozuka was shot down. About 10 days before that, we dismantled our rainy season Bahai and started up from the Lok area by way of Brawl towards the ridge. We usually carried our beacon raids between October 5 and October 20. So the Kozuka was shot and he was alone by himself for the last 2 years on the island. He's also described the scene how Kozuka was shot. As I put away Kozuka's rifle, this rifle that he had had by his side continually for 28 years, it was difficult to suppress the emotions that rose within me, and he cried. People came to look out for him again. His actually brother came to look out for him again. Onoda-san, if you don't believe you're Japanese, load up your infantry rifle before you came out. I had to laugh. Load up my rifle. The rifle had been kept loaded for nearly 30 years. I had heard these words at the Karum officers training. Tadao has come all the way from Brazil. His brother Tadao had come from Brazil to actually get him back. At the time of the 1959 search party, I thought someone had been imitating my brother Toshio's voice. But this time, the voices brought Cheese, his sister, and his brother had come to get him again in 1972, 28 years after the war was over. This time, he was sure that it was his brother and sister. I thought someone had been imitating my brother last time, but this time, the voices both Cheese and Tadao's were definitely theirs. This seemed to mean that the new search party had actually come from Japan and not from the American Intelligence Corps. I wanted to make sure of this point. He did not even come out when his brother and sister actually came, and he believed they were his brother and sister because he still felt that it was some sort of a trap. I had felt tempted by my brother's appeal, but it would not do for me to spoil the larger plan by giving in. He did not want to surrender even now. One thing that troubled me was the members of the search party always seemed to be accompanied by armed Philippine soldiers. Their helicopters kept flying noisily over the island and dropping countless leaflets in the jungles. Looking at it from another angle, if they really wanted me to come out, they should have left only a telephone but not a machine gun and ammunition. It was my brother's voice again, calling me by my childhood nickname. He said, Hironko, this is Tadao. Many of the search party had left. And the soldiers who are here are only to protect us. They are not trying to kill you. I know you have had the experience of seeing Kozuka killed before your eyes, and I don't suppose you believe anything we say, but if you don't get in touch with us, there is nothing we can do. Be brave, act like an officer. I listened to my brother broadcasting 2 nights in a row, but I interpreted this also to mean the opposite of what he was saying. His brother was right there. He did not believe his brother, and he did not come out because he believed it was a trap. All in all, I decided a better way of hiding and wait a little bit longer. 2 months later, the island quieted down again and his brother left. 6 months had passed since Kozuka's death. It gave me a strange feeling to know that even my aged father had been brought down to Lubang. Toward the end of April, by way of checking whether the search party really lay, I went to Mountain Hut. There I found a 17-syllable poem written by my father and left in the hut for me. It said, not even an echo responds to my call in the summery mountains. It gave me a strange feeling to know that even my aged father had been brought down to Lubang. His entire family came looking for him and he still did not come out. Curiously enough, I was less lonely than I had thought I would be. I simply felt no urge to talk. Actually, Kozuka had never been much of a talker, and myself not the sort to take the initiative in the conversation. A new year arrived, and for the 29th time, I celebrated New Year's Day on Lubang. This is an incredible, fascinating story. It's just incredible. So Feb 20, 1974, this is when Suzuki, who actually found him, who was looking for him in the jungle, found him. So he says it would have to be, this is very close to when he's about to leave the jungle, so Lubang. It would have to be a surprise attack. He found this guy, but if I knocked off one of them in the beginning, he felt there were some strangers in the jungle. And the rest would be man-to-man combat, which I'm confident I would win. Going forward 5 or 6 paces, I sighted a man with his back to the river. He was building a fire, obviously to cook his dinner. After ascertaining there was no gun nearby, I called out to him. He stood up and he turned around. His eyes was round. And he wore a t-shirt, dark blue trousers and rubber sandals. He faced me and saluted. Then he saluted again. His hands were trembling and I would have sworn his knees were too. The islanders almost fled the minute I called out to them, and this man stood his ground. True, he was shaking, but he was also making a proper salute. It flashed through my mind that he might have been the son of the soldier in the Japanese occupation force. He said, I'm Japanese, I'm Japanese. And he spoke to him. He said, I'm a tourist. Tourist? What could he mean by that? Why would a tourist come to this island? There's something fishy about his character, and I was fairly sure he had been sent by the army, by the enemy. He asked, Are you Onoda-san? He said, I'm Onoda. Really, Lieutenant Onoda? I nodded. I know you've had a long, hard time. The war is over. Won't you come back to Japan? His use of polite expressions convinced me that he must have been brought up in Japan, and he was rushing things too much. Did he think that he could just make the simple statement the war was over and I would go running back to Japan with him? After all these years, it made me angry. No, I won't go back. For me, the war hasn't ended. Why would you wouldn't understand? If you want me to go back to Japan, bring me my orders. He would not leave the jungle unless he would have his orders, which he was waiting for 30 years. There must be proper orders. What do you plan to do? Die here? I will if I don't have my orders to the contrary. So he was willing to die in case he didn't have his orders to the contrary. I said gruffly and straight to his face, this was my first meeting with Norio Suzuki. Norio Suzuki was a tourist who was actually looking for Onoda, and he risked his life to find Onoda. He was a young guy, and he risked his life to find Onoda. The young man said, Onoda-san, the emperor and people of Japan are worried about you. Did you bring any orders for me? No. In that case, they have to keep on worrying. He sent Suzuki back and told him, if you bring me my orders, I will actually come back to Japan and leave the jungle, but I need my orders. I, for my part, when he was talking to Suzuki, watching his reactions closely for any sign that he might not be what he said he was. I had not talked to anybody since Kozuka's death 16 months earlier, and I would have been enjoying myself with the lingering fear that Norio Suzuki was an enemy agent. He was doubting even Norio Suzuki would actually come to get him back. After we talked for 2 hours, he asked, what could I do to persuade you to come out of the jungle? Just what it says in the newspapers, I answered. Major Taniguchi is my immediate superior. I won't give in until I have direct orders from him. He was still waiting orders from Major Taniguchi, who had sent him to Labang. Let me get this straight then, said Suzuki. If I bring Major Taniguchi, and if Major Taniguchi tells you to come at such a such place and such a such time, will you come, right? Right, he said. And this time Onoda said, if Major Taniguchi says, if he has orders from Major Taniguchi, he would come back. He seemed so disappointed, and I said, I'll have some of the beans instead. He was offered food, and he accepted the food that he was offered. I took a spoonful in my mouth and savored the wonderful flavor. It felt that for the first time in 30 years I was eating something fit for human consumption. It was some food that Suzuki offered him, beans, and he had. He said, this is the first time I was having something that was fit for human consumption. My tongue, my whole mouth melted. Suzuki said, I'm lucky I never dreamed I'd meet you. Only after 4 days here. And this is how Suzuki left, with the commitment that he would come back with orders to get him back. And he took a picture so that he could go back to Japan and show that he had actually met Onoda. So he went back to Japan, and this time Onoda forgot that he actually met someone, because he believed it could have been an enemy trap. He believed if I died, it would be death in the line of duty, and my spirit would be enshrined in Yasukuni shrine. The idea appealed to me. So now this is the last chapter where he actually gets order from Major Taniguchi, who had actually become a bookseller after the war was over. And so this is what happened. So 2 months later, I remember that Suzuki and I had agreed to leave messages in a box that had been set up by search parties on a boulder at the Snake Mountain. Maybe I would find a message there. Dust I went to see. A brand new plastic bag was taped to the side of the box. I knew he must have come back. Suzuki had come back, and he'd come back with Major Taniguchi. I've come back for you just as I promised. There are also copies of 2 of my orders. There are also copies of 2 army orders. The minute I looked at the photos, it had been enlarged to 10 by 10. I was struck by my resemblance to both my uncles of the family. It also seemed to me that I looked rather Generals Sado Araki and Sujiro Hayashiki. It occurred to me that if a man stayed in the army that long, maybe he could not help looking like that. One order from 14th Army Headquarters and the other from Special Quadrant. The other said, instructions be given to Lieutenant Onoda orally. Oral instruction. This is what I had been waiting for all those years. The next day, Major Taniguchi delivered to me orally orders, the special section of Chief of Staff. Major Taniguchi and went to the Agavan River to wash up. He handed me a razor and suggested I shave. I'll shave off my goatee. I don't need to scare the islanders anymore. No, the major said, leave that because the president specifically requested you come as you were in the mountain. President? Yes, the President Marcos of the Philippines said he wanted to see you after you found. Major Taniguchi shaved the back of my bring me down here, you wouldn't know. You will be a celebrity once you come back to Japan. And this is how he got back. The three of us breakfasted red rice, fish and stewed vegetables, all from the cans. We ate ravenously. This was then he met his brother Toshio and he said, we finally found you. This was our reunion after 30 years. And now I alone was returning, leaving the spirits of two irreplaceable comrades on the island, returning to a Japan that had lost the war 30 years earlier, returning to my fatherland for which I had fought until the day before. If there had not been people around, I would have beat my head on the ground and wailed. 10 minutes later, the helicopter I had boarded rose off Lubang, flaying the grass around it. Through the window-proof glass, I could see Kozuka's grave. And gradually the whole island grew smaller and began to fade. For the first time I was looking down upon my battlefield for 30 years. What had I fought here for 30 years? Who had I been fighting for? What was the cause? Manila Bay bathed in the evening sun. Well, that's the end of the book. This is the story of a man who spent 30 years fighting a war that was over 29 years back. He fought a war for 29 years, a war that did not exist. And the only reason he actually stayed in the jungle because he felt that he was doing his duty. And if he died doing his duty, it would be honorable and respectful. And that's the reason he did not surrender. He waited for his orders because he was told that his orders would come and his seniors would come and get him back. And he waited for them for 30 years. 30 damn years. He lived on bananas, he lived on coconuts, he lived on beef. From killing cows, he stole off the islanders' stuff, clothes, and he lived on the huts, he slept on the ground. He cut off his hair or those of his colleagues. They are nothing. The only reason Hiro Onoda spent 30 years on the island of Lubang because he believed that he was doing the right thing. That is the story of Hiro Onoda. I hope it inspires you to believe in yourself. I hope it inspires you to fight off anything that you face. Because if a man can stay in a jungle for 30 years without food, without a roof on the head, without anything the civilization has to offer, maybe all of us can also fight off anything that life throws at us. Alright, thanks for watching. Keep subscribe to the channel. I'm obviously reading my book and I'll be reading the rest of the books that I've written. I'll also be reviewing other books like I've reviewed this book. And the idea is to inspire you and keep believing in life. Thank you. Bye.